Minh Thúy xin kính chào quý vị hôm nay thứ Sáu, 14 tháng 6, 2024. Đến với VATV hôm nay gồm có phỏng vấn đặc biệt và nhạc lá bồ đề. Kính thưa quý vị, năm 1962 thì ông Frank Scotton vừa được gửi sang Việt Nam khi các cơ quan của Hoa Kỳ chưa thật sự thành hình. Nguồn máy hoạt động của Mỹ đã bắt đầu hoạt động mạnh nhưng chưa thật sự ăn khớp với nhau. Các cơ quan quân sự, dân sự thường có những tiêu chuẩn làm việc khác nhau. Khi phối hợp hành động, những tiêu chuẩn làm việc có đôi khi xung khắc. Một trong những xung khắc điển hình là cách viết báo cáo của các cơ quan dân sự và quân sự. Ngoài những xung khắc khó tránh đó, các cơ quan Mỹ còn phải cộng tác với các cơ quan Việt Nam. Khi công tác ở Việt Nam, trong thời điểm này thì ông Frank Scotton đã kể lại một cuộc chạm trán căng thẳng giữa Thiếu tá Kelly, người bạn của ông, và tướng Timmes. Ông cũng kể lại cách hoạt động của các cơ quan như nhóm cố vấn hỗ trợ quân sự, Bộ Viện trợ quân sự của Cơ quan Thông tin Hoa Kỳ. Các bản báo cáo khác nhau của các cơ quan Hoa Kỳ đã gây ra những khó khăn gì? Phải làm thế nào để tổng hợp các bản báo cáo đó để được cái nhìn tổng quát nhất và đúng nhất? Trong phần 3 phỏng vấn lần này thì Minh Thúy mời quý vị tiếp tục theo dõi tình hình Việt Nam năm 1962 qua các công tác của ông Frank Scotton do Phan Lê Dũng, Võ Thành Nhân và Minh Thúy thực hiện.
Are you talking including the military or just on the civilian side?
That was a different situation. Here and there, when I traveled, for instance, I would find an advisor, a province advisor, who really seemed to care about learning the happenstance of that particular province and what was going on. But most of the military, I think, were following kind of pro forma approaches to what it was they had to do. And I know that there were requirements. I didn't have a specific reporting requirement. I was told by Baumgardner to report what I thought was important. But the military had reporting requirements. And I know at one point when General Timmes, who was at that time MACV and MAG were distinct. Later, after General Timmes left, MACV absorbed MAG. But when General Timmes was head of MAG, he came up to Quang Ngai and at a lunch with the Quang Ngai province advisor, Major Bob Kelly, who later worked with me on the in developing the locally based anti-communist units that Frank Snepp mentioned. Kelly was a good guy and a kind of an irregular sort of army major. So General Timmes said to him at lunch, I was about 3 chairs away, he said, Kelly, they tell me that you're ash-canning some of our report requests. And the night before, Kelly had complained to me, he said, God damn it, they keep asking for this, asking for that, They want me to count sandwich wrappers or something. So Kelly said, yeah, I could see him kind of drawing himself up, offended, and then he said, well, no, sir, but it seems sometimes that the way the report requests are phrased, it's almost like they're presupposing I'm going to give a certain answer. And then the general said to General Timmes said, Kelly, you're full of shit. Well, Kelly was a World War II veteran of the Pacific Islands, and so he, I could see him kind of drawing himself up like, nobody told me that. But then he realized, General, Major, and he subsided him and he said, yes, sir. So there was that kind of tension, and it was rare for me to find someone like Major Kelly who would consciously look deeper than what the reports indicated was expected of him. And that's why I think Kelly was such a keystone to what it was that we did subsequently. And
from what you're telling me, it seems like you, the American, I would say, have different organizations that's going into different directions that not necessarily coordinate with one another in their report and their outlook, and like the military is going one way and you are going USIA in another way, and then possibly other organizations like the CIA is going still in another different direction, and gathering your own information from the government. You're telling me it's very pro forma, and in your case it's very informal. I don't know what the CIA is doing, but how are all this connected?
I think that each of the different organizations had their organizational bias towards information collection. And you know, that may have been the case with some elements of USIA too. I know at that time, I think USIA had begun doing a weekly film newscast on behalf of the Ministry of Information. And
the Ministry of Information of the Vietnamese people,
of the Vietnamese government. I think that they were helping them, or not yet doing it for them, but helping them. And the embassy political section had its kind of requirements as a formula for example, the consul in Hue to be responsive of, in the political section, the young officers that would go out and make a report and come back. And the Central Intelligence Agency had specific elements of tasking that they would place upon officers who would go to the field. At that time, there was not much of a field presence, but they had officers, for instance, who would go down to Quien Hoa, spend 2 or 3 days there, observe what Tran Nguyen Chau was doing, and make a report. The difference in my case, which allowed me, I think, to pursue a different kind of education within Vietnam, is that Ev Baumgardner did not place requirements upon me. You know, it was a extraordinarily broad charter. You know, go to Central Vietnam, Quang Ngai, Binh Dinh, Phu Yen, and if you must, you know, up to Kon Tum and Pleiku, but the populated area of those 3 provinces, you know.
What was it that you're trying to find out?
What's happening? What's important?
What criteria are you looking for when you're saying looking for something that you think is important? But what are the criteria that you're using to judge whether one event or one person is more important than other, and how do you go about that?
Well, in the beginning, for example, I spent about almost a month with the 4th Psychological Operations Company, that was actually a special operations company commanded by Nguyen Thuy, with a Jirai, Captain Yu Xiu, as his deputy, and they were operating within the An Lao Valley. And my landlord in Quy Nhon had told me that was a critical area in Binh Dinh province. So I went up and spent almost a month with them, and I learned. You know, I learned about the history of that area and the presence of the residual presence of the communists. And just to tell you one story, there were firing illumination rounds from mortars to indicate the location, and then with loudspeakers, and having gone up into the foothills, Captain Thuy's men invited anyone who wanted to leave the communist side to, you know, come towards the light, come in. So actually, within a period of about...
Is it like rallying effort? Rallying effort?
Yeah, well, he didn't call it that, but 3 people who'd been in communist base area came down. They were tired, and They didn't really want to do it anymore.
Was it effective? What they're doing? Was it very effective?
Well, they were being trained, but they left. So as I was speaking with them, and at that point my Vietnamese was so cranky I needed help from an interpreter. But as I spoke with them, and I asked them at one point, kind of just out of curiosity, how long had that base area been in a place called Con Truc? You may recall from my email address. And the answer was 1945. And I remember kind of not staggering backwards, but kind of leaning backward and thinking, 1945? When I was 7 years old, there was a communist area there? And this is 1963? So how long ago was it that they already had a training area there? And within the first several months that I was spending time in that area, that part of Vietnam, there were moments like that that made me realize this is really, really difficult. You know, it's not a simple matter of communism being foisted upon people in Hungary. You know, this, like it or not, they have placed roots here. The roots are transplanted, maybe, from the Comintern via Ho Chi Minh, but they've got roots in this place. So that was, you know, a real kind of
eye-opening experience.
Yeah, an eye-opening experience, and it I think in some ways it colored everything I did thereafter. So I was doing that, and then you know, they were talking about trails. So I, with the advice, helpful advice of Captain Thuy, who remained a good friend over the years, I walked a few of those trails, probably no more than 6 or 7.
Minh Thúy xin kính chào quý vị hôm nay thứ Sáu, 21 tháng 6, 2024. Đến với VATV hôm nay gồm có phỏng vấn đặc biệt và nhạc lá bồ đề. Kính thưa quý vị, trong khung cảnh chuyển đổi mãnh liệt năm 1962, những thay đổi xảy ra không những chỉ ở thành phố với các cuộc biểu tình, xuống đường, mà còn ở các miền xa thành phố như là miền Trung. Ngoài việc đối phó trực tiếp với Cộng sản, chính quyền ông Diệm còn phải đối phó với những mưu mô đảo chính trong thành phố và quanh Sài Gòn. Những lo lắng của chính quyền về việc đảo chính đã ảnh hưởng thế nào đến các quyết định quân sự? Năm 1962, như đã trình bày trong kỳ trước, khi được biệt phái về miền Trung, thì ông Frank Scotton đã trực tiếp chứng kiến những hoạt động chiêu hội của đại úy Nguyễn Tùy. Sau khi chứng kiến, ông đã về ở luôn với những người lính của đại úy Nguyễn Tùy để theo dõi kỹ hơn các hoạt động chiêu hội. Khi đã tạm quen thuộc với địa hình thì ông Frank Scotton đã có một quyết định táo bạo. Ông quyết định tự mình đi vào sâu những con lộ trong rừng ở thung lũng An Lão để tìm hiểu tình hình. Đây là một quyết định khó hiểu và dường như quyết định duy nhất của ông. Ông Frank Scotton muốn tìm hiểu gì trong các con đường đó? Và tại sao phải đi một mình trong rừng rậm và ở lại vào ban đêm? Ngoài việc theo dõi các hoạt động chiêu hội, thì ông Frank Scotton còn chứng kiến những quyết định kỳ quặc trong việc tái phối trí các sư đoàn miền Trung, những quyết định hoàn toàn gần như bất lợi cho miền Nam. Giữa lúc các cuộc biểu tình lan rộng ở miền Trung, thì ông cũng nói chuyện với dân chúng ở miền Trung để tìm hiểu sự suy nghĩ của họ về những biến động xuống đường của Phật giáo, những suy nghĩ của người dân ở cả phía Công giáo lẫn phía Phật giáo. Trong kỳ phỏng vấn này thì Minh Thúy mời quý vị tiếp tục theo dõi tình hình biến loạn ở miền Trung khi các biến cố biểu tình đang lan dần ra, cùng những quyết định quân sự kỳ quặc của chính quyền miền Nam khi phải đối phó với các cuộc biểu tình lan tràn đó. Xin mời quý vị tiếp tục theo dõi các công tác của ông Frank Scotton ở miền Trung khi ông tiến sâu vào vùng Bình Định, thung lũng An Lão trong phần 4 phỏng vấn sau đây do Phan Lê Dũng, Võ Thành Nhân và Minh Thúy thực hiện.
What's the point? What's the point for walking the trails?
I wanted to see who else was on those trails. Now, would I have done that if I was older and more experienced? Maybe not. But I was young at the time. And I thought, and I remember...
And nobody ever told you to walk the trails or anything like that? It's completely...
No, nobody told me to, but nobody told me not to.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking to myself, you know, we had the old French maps at that point, and you could see the movement of trails from place to place. So I thought to myself, well, I'm going to do that. And Twee gave me some advice, and even my landlord...
they weren't against it at all as you walk the trail? They wouldn't give you any one?
Well, Twee said, you know, you be very, very careful. And even the landlord, you know, said, you know, be careful out there. But he helped me go to the market and get a local mosquito net and dye it. And then told me, you know, that even if you're not bothered by mosquitoes, he said, if you're anywhere, you know, don't sleep on the trail. Get off the trail. Get under some bushes. Pull that mosquito net over you. You know, disappear into the...
So actually your experience and your training is not actually by the American, but very much by the Vietnamese who were in that local area.
By Vietnamese and by kind of a, you know, a mental inclination on my part, calculation. So anyway, as the years passed, and you know, there's a tendency to befriend those who think like you, and so I was making friends with other Americans, but they tended to be people who thought the same way as I did. Now, you know, jumping ahead to that 1963 episode, I had seen from the spring onward that there were real social, meaning foundational problems for politics, difficulties in central Vietnam with respect to the Catholic Buddhist issue.
Be more concrete what you see in the, as you see as something almost like the beginning of an upheaval. Is that what you say?
Well, I could see that in the spring of '63. For instance, the ARVN units in An Lao Valley were withdrawn from the An Lao Valley for troop re-education, and I thought that was a mistake. And sure enough, at the end of 1963, I think in December of '63 or January of '64, the first district, Republic of Vietnam, to be completely taken over by the communists was An Lao in Binh Dinh province.
And did you know who made the decision to pull back the troop? Do you know?
Well, I think it was on the part of the government, the government of President Siem, because they thought they needed, the soldiers needed indoctrination, because you had the problem between the government and Buddhists. I wouldn't say Catholics and Buddhists, because in Quy Nhon, where I talked a lot with Catholics in the seminary and Buddhists in the pagodas, the feeling was, in general, on both parts, deep regret that this had come to pass. But I think that with respect to the 9th Division, at least, which at that time was located in Binh Dinh province, the problem, as the 9th Division commander saw it, was keeping troop loyalty, and so they pulled back and they did a lot of troop indoctrination. And
then they just let it open like that.
Well, there was that, but then another factor was that the government, Saigon, whether Americans or Vietnamese or whatever organization and agency, Saigon always seemed to me to be most sensitive to developments in the provinces around Saigon. So there was already a plan to the 9th Division had been raised and trained in Binh Dinh. There was a plan to transfer it to the Mekong Delta.
And for what reason?
Well, because they were excessively, well, I wouldn't, maybe not excessively, they were more concerned about deteriorating security in the provinces close to Saigon than they were elsewhere. And there was a developing plan to transfer the 25th Division from Quang Ngai further south.
This is the first republic you're talking about. They're still worrying about these problems.
But they were already planning. So when I met, when I had a conversation with President Lodge in Dalat there at the end of October, I think it was October 28th. Part of my conversing with him was to try to explain to him what a disastrous decision this was to be moving the 9th Division from Central Vietnam to the Delta and planning for the 25th Division to later move from Central Vietnam to the Delta. Mm-hmm. That if they needed 2 additional divisions in the Delta, raise the divisions, equip and train them in the Delta, but don't create a vacuum in a critical part of the country.
So you feel like because of the so-called lack of understanding of the front, or do they really care more about Saigon? Is it the decision is being made by the government or by the military side here to move the troops from the central to the south?
I think that the decision to move those 2 divisions to the area west and south of Saigon was a decision that
executive branch,
both MACV and the government of Vietnam kind of agreed upon. I don't think that the Americans told the Vietnamese to do it, but I think that the Americans didn't argue against doing it. See, the problem was if they needed 2 divisions there, as I saw it, they should raise 2 new divisions. But on the American side, maybe then they were thinking about, well, how do we finance that? How do we equip that? How do we go about doing it? But it was a non-political decision made in late 1963 that had disastrous consequences.
And you said by that time you did not have a lot of so-called invasion and attack from the north. That's why it's possible to think in that term, which was later proved like.
Well, you had people. I was introduced to a guy, a Banar tribesman that I mentioned in my book, and was captured in An Khe and had been wounded in the foot. He had been relocated to the north, and now he had re-infiltrated, and despite being wounded, a lot of self-confidence and pretty sharp-minded guy. So there were people coming in, but you did not have battalion-size units or regimental-size units coming in yet. But you did have a lot of activity in central Vietnam and elsewhere in Vietnam, and
Do you think that the American side by that time was fully informed of this, or it's just you people in front and trying to find out the problem that sends this, but not the central office?
I think that generally speaking, on the American side, we were not as well informed as we should have been. I thought in some respects the embassy was functioning as any embassy would in any other part of the world. Mm-hmm. And I thought that embassies, I thought we needed a different approach, but we weren't getting it.